Reda MEP. You wrote a report that was adopted by the European Parliament earlier this year on the current copyright rules. Are you pleased with the Commission's communication?
The Commission's communication has taken on board a few proposals from the European Parliament, particularly to make education and research across borders easier. But at the same time, it has completely ignored that the Parliament explicitly voted against the introduction of any kind of Google snippet fee that they are still considering in their communication. And at the same time, there's a general lack of ambition. The Parliament asked for a general minimum standard across all the exceptions to copyright and for greater cross-border access to cultural content. Now, there are some first steps in this direction. The Commission has proposed a new regulation on portability, which basically means you will be able to take your Netflix subscription or your Sky TV subscription on holiday. But the problem persists that there are a lot of people that don't have a legal offer in their member state at all, and they would still not be able to pay for content that is offered in another member state.
Would you like to see completely free access across the EU to all content?
I think it shouldn't matter in which member state you live. So if you mean free in the sense of not paying for it, this is not what I'm asking for. But free in the sense that your location within the EU shouldn't matter, then yes. Because there are audiences in Europe that are currently not being served. They don't have a legal offer, and the artists are not able to reach these audiences and get remuneration from them. And that's something we need to fix.
Do you think we'll see a fair balance between the rights of authors and the rights of the consumer in this proposal?
I think in the current copyright framework, both the authors and the consumers are getting a very bad deal because all the rights are concentrated with the rights holders, so the publishers, the intermediaries, and both the authors are not getting a fair share of the value created, and the consumers and users of copyrighted content are unnecessarily restricted. So there is no contradiction between the interests of authors and users, because quite often the reason why you want to use the cultural content of somebody else is because you are an author yourself. So for example, if you want to quote somebody, or if you want to take a picture of a public building, the so-called freedom of panorama, that's because you're a photographer or you're a writer yourself.
On the issue of freedom of panorama, this was one question that wasn't welcomed by the Parliament as a whole. Would you like to see further movement on this issue?
Actually, it was. The situation was as such that the committee responsible for negotiating my report took my original proposal to have freedom of panorama in all of Europe and turned it on its head, saying it should be restricted everywhere. In the end, the Parliament just took out this proposal altogether because they didn't want to restrict freedom of panorama. However, the Commission is now going in the direction of what I originally proposed, that is to extend the freedom of panorama, and I think that is what the people of Europe want.
The Commission are proposing voluntary arrangements to reduce piracy through follow the money proposal. Do you think this will be satisfactory for the industry?
I think the industry is realizing that going after a teenager in their bedroom who may have downloaded a film is not really helping anybody. I think what is important is, if we're looking at these voluntary measures, that none of the industry players are put in the situation that they have to play some kind of private copyright cop. So the question of what is legal, what is illegal still needs to be with the courts. But it is, of course, perfectly fair if somebody says, I don't want to put advertisements on an illegal website, and I think that's reasonable.
The Commission will be making proposals, legislative proposals, in the second quarter of 2016. Which proposals do you think will be the most important for the EU citizens?
I think the most important will be the reform of the so-called Copyright Directive from 2001. This is the one on which I drafted the report for the Parliament. In this directive so far, only rights of the rights holders have been defined, but no rights of the public. So for example, whether you're allowed to quote from a work, whether you're allowed to make a parody, whether you have freedom of panorama, this is all different from country to country, and the Commission wants to propose more common rules in this area.